This is Wednesday, July 26, 2017. This is Primary Stage's Off-Broadway Oral History Project. And today we are talking to director, actor, teacher of acting, and founder of the Terry Schreiber Studios, Mr. Terry Schreiber. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing it with me here. I appreciate it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. The first 5 years of my life was in a little town in Elmo, Wisconsin. And then we moved to St. Paul, and I essentially did all my schooling from grade school to high school to college in St. Paul.
And in grade school, were you in public schools, private schools?
Yes, public school.
Public schools. Yeah. Were you aware of theater or things during that time?
Yes, oh yes.
What was theater like in St. Paul and at the school you go?
Well, I had a teacher in grade school that was very active with productions. And I think I did my first play when I was in the 6th grade, and she cast me in the 8th grade class play. It was a play called Why the Chimes Rang, or How the Chimes Rang, whatever. And I was the young boy that got the chimes to ring. I don't know how anymore or whatever, but that was my first experience, and I loved it. And we did other plays in grade school. And then in high school, I jocked. I played 3 different sports. We had a wonderful high school teacher, and he did really plays like Mad Woman of Shiloh. We did not do things like Time Out for Ginger and plays like that. He did The Crucible. But I was always in the middle of a season. Either it was football or hockey or baseball, so I just wasn't that available. So I only ended up, I think, in one play that I remember in high school, because it worked out with practice and everything like that.
And what was that play?
That was Mad Woman of Shiloh. I ended up doing a character role, Dr. Jardine or something like that in it. But it was something small enough that I could still work it around practice. And I'm sorry I missed that opportunity, because Dick Morrison, the teacher, I did a lot of, he also taught radio and things like that. And I could have gotten so much more out of it if I...
This would have been pre-Guthrie, but there was other theater happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul
Community
at that
theater.
time.
So I did, not in high school, but in college, I did a lot of community theater between St. Paul and Minneapolis.
And you were at college where?
St. Thomas.
In St. Paul?
Yes, it was a college at that time. It's now a university.
Mm-hmm. And what were the plays that you started doing then?
Well, it's interesting because the professor really taught speech and so forth. I don't think he taught any acting classes. He was kind of in revolt against the college because he wanted a new theater. And we were using this old theater that the high school on the campus used. And he just was not going to do another play until they built a new theater. So by my junior year, they had built another theater for him. And I think I only ended up my senior year in one play there. But St. Catherine's, this was an all-men's school. St. Catherine's was our sister college, and I did plays there. And I think the thing that really hooked me was my freshman year in college. I stayed out of school for a year. I went to radio school for a year. And then I realized I really wanted to go back to college. And it's a very interesting story that, I jocked my way through high school. I don't even think I knew what a noun was when I left high school. And one day I was hitchhiking to work. I was going to radio school to be an announcer, a DJ, or especially sports announcer. And my high school coach picked me up. I was hitchhiking to work. And in the car, he said, "Well, how's McAllister?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not going." And he said, "How come you're not going?" And I said, "Because my college aptitude was too low. I got rejected by about 3 colleges. And he said, "Do you want to go to school?" And I said, "Very badly. I really want to go to college." And he said, "Would your parents object if you went to St. Thomas, which is a Catholic school?" And I said, "No, I grew up with the football coach's sons. And St. Paul was, the area I was in was very Irish Catholic." And I said, "My parents wouldn't object at all." And 2 days later, I was in St. Thomas. And it was very interesting because I remember 4 years later writing a letter to the professor at McAllister who rejected me and said I should learn a trade. And 4 years later, I mean, I had to study. I probably put in 30 hours a week because I was dealing with all the guys that had gone through Catholic high schools. And you know, the education with the nuns and so forth. So I was really behind. I had to burn the midnight oil. I never would have passed. But I had some really influential professors, especially in the English department. And my advisor had been an actor. And I did speech work with him. But 4 years later, and I don't mean this to sound egotistical, but because I really had to work, but I graduated with, I think, an A- in my major. And I had great pleasure writing the man at McAllister and saying, the next time you give somebody advice to learn a trade, kind of take into their account first, because they scored badly on the test. You didn't take into account somebody's will and desire. And I suggest you do that with somebody else.
And did you hear back from them?
No, because I said, I think I'm graduating with an A-, and I believe St. Thomas is higher scholastically than McAllister. I never heard back from him, because that was the truth. But boy, it was 4 years, it was vengeance is mine. And I got it.
And what were the shows you did at St. Catherine's?
What was, well, the play that really influenced me, I mean, we're talking about the 50s, Casey, and that was when I really got under the influence of James Dean, you know, and Marlon Brando, and those kind of actors. And I was cast in Truman Capote's The Grass Harp, and it just was a role that I really connected. I think it's Colin Talbot, I still remember the character's name, that I really, really connected with.
Tricky show, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tricky
Yeah.
script.
And they had to pick and choose. St. Thomas was a Jesuit school, but they were much more open than St. Catherine's was the nuns. And it was very hard. Mabel Fry was a wonderful teacher, director. I did a lot of work at St. Catherine's, but she had to be very careful in the plays she picked.
Was there any crossover at that time, because University of Minnesota also had a strong theater
very good theater
department,
department.
and produced a lot of playwrights a little bit later than that, but yeah.
I would go over and do, I would go over to see. I had a season ticket to the University of Minnesota, and a lot of my friends were there. I almost transferred my sophomore year, and I'm really glad I didn't, and I'm really glad I wasn't a theater major, that I was an English major. Because I think it's, and even when I pick up theater majors here that study with me, I think somebody that's interested in acting, I think they should take theater classes, but I would be much more pushing them towards an English major or a philosophy major.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you went to radio school, what did the school consist of?
Radio training, it was the Brown Institute of the Air in Minneapolis, and it was training radio announcers. Mm-hmm. And I probably was most interested in getting into sports announcing. And I know with the St. Paul Saints or our professional teams, sometimes I was able to sit up in the booth and do a mock broadcast and tape it and then bring it back to the school for criticism. So, and I was right on the verge of finishing there, and that's when the whole thing happened with St. Thomas. And I was 19 and really wanted to go back to college.
So it was a 1-year program, 2-year program at radio school?
I think it was a 2-year program.
2-year program.
Yeah. I could be wrong about it. Maybe it was just a year.
What was it then? Was your family involved in the arts at all?
No. No. My mother always was drawn to them. Mm-hmm. My dad was, from Elma, Wisconsin, and that's like the Mississippi River, the bluffs, 2nd Street, Main Street, and so he grew up hunting and fishing. He played a lot of baseball. And for a while, when I was in high school, we had an awfully good baseball team. And I really had visions of playing professional baseball. I was bat boy at one point for our AAA farm club of the Dodgers, the St. Paul Saints. And I still tell stories about some of those guys. I was particularly Sandy Ambrose, who they got out of Cuba, and didn't speak a word of English. And, there was a black third baseman that spoke Spanish who would translate for Sandy. And for some reason, those two guys took me under their wing and always looked out for me. And it was my first experience, almost racial experience, because St. Paul, where I was, dominantly white. There was the African American section, but it was a wonderful experience.
So what happened once you finished school?
Well, in college, I did summer stock each year.
And where was that?
My first summer stock was at the Black Hills Playhouse. Between my sophomore and junior year, I was at the Black Hills Playhouse in South Dakota. That was connected with the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, so I got some college credits there. And then the next year, I went to Helena, Montana, and they were also connected with a college. So it was the old Brewery Theater in Helena, Montana. It used to be a theater that the Floridora girls danced in. And one of the girls knows that's the thinnest waist in the world. She even had her lower ribs removed so she could continue to have the smallest waist. But that was an incredible town, Helena, Montana. And it was very open, and it was a very interesting experience. Next to our theater were two blocks of brothels. The Cowboys would come in on the weekend, and once in a while we'd get one of them knocking on our door, and we'd have to say, no, it's locked down. But there was never, with the openness, there was a lot of American Indians, Native Americans, and there was never any kind of skirmish on the streets. There was a lot of professional gamblers in the town, but it was the capital of Montana. So it was.
And what were the plays you were doing in Montana?
They were commercial plays. I remember getting to do The Country Girl and getting cast way over my head. I got cast as Frank Elgin, but it was a non-equity company. And I think they did The Matchmaker, I remember that. But it was a commercial theater, and the marshals who ran it were very big in radio and television in Helena.
How about the summer before? What was that?
Well, the Black Hills Playhouse, that was again a commercial. There was one steady play we did every Monday night that was kind of a history of South Dakota. So that was traditional. It was written by the artistic director of the company, The Legend of Devil's Gulch, and we played that every Monday night. But then the rest of it, that was the first time I did The Matchmaker, then I did it a year later. But it was a commercial season. Everybody that was there were out of different colleges. And we got college credit. And then the next year was at Helena, Montana. And then after my senior year in college, I went to the Paul Bunyan Playhouse in Bemidji, Minnesota. And Lee Adey, who was one of the head professors at the University of Minnesota, ran that. And that was a tremendous season. I mean, I think I did 9 leads in 10 weeks. So it was like a new play every week.
Each?
I think I went out for beers once the entire summer, because you just had to start learning a new show. Yeah. And I was always very responsible about the lines and not paraphrasing. So that's what I did.
And what were the plays of the Paul Bunyan?
Again, it was a commercial season. One murder mystery. I can't remember if there was a musical or not. But with Bemidji, there was a lot of summer people there, so all those seasons were picked for the audience.
And when you left
I left for New York. I finished the season in Bemidji in August, and I left for New York in 1960 in September.
In September?
Yeah, for New York. Because I was finished with college.
And when you moved to New York, where did you move to? Where was the first place you lived?
Oh, I started on the Upper West Side. I'm still on the Upper West Side. And an incredible place. I think I paid $16.50 a week, and probably all the roaches you could chase off the walls, right? I used to knock before I came in, like, all right, fellas, I'm home, get out of here. And the bathroom was down the hall. I think it was way over on Riverside and 71st or something like that. And then I moved in with somebody, and we were not compatible at all. And then I ended up on 92nd Street for a long while. I've always lived on the Upper West Side.
And tell us about, this is 1960 September in New York City. What was the theater scene like then?
Oh, it was very active. And I had come to New York in 1958 because while I was in college, I was also in the Navy Reserve. So I was a weekend warrior, and I had to do a couple of summers of boot camp with that, or one summer of boot camp, and the second summer I worked there. But I wrangled a flight to Niagara Falls in 1958 and smuggled a buddy of mine on board in a Navy uniform. Yeah. And we got to Niagara Falls, and then we hitchhiked to New York from there, and we ended up seeing The Long Day's Journey into Night on Monday night, the original production with Frederick March and Jason Robards, and then on Tuesday night we saw The Iceman Cometh.
And what did you think?
Oh, my God. The Long Day's Journey into Night, Frederick March is still the greatest James Tyrone I have ever seen. And Jason Robards hit that stage, I went right out of my chair. I mean, in college, I did all my papers on Eugene O'Neill. So I was really steeped in Eugene O'Neill, and I know the professor said to me, look, I'm giving you another A, but if you do one more paper on Eugene O'Neill, you get a D. There are other writers. But to see Long Day's Journey, and when Jason hit that stage, I'll never forget that voice. I mean, he was Jamie Tyrone. And Frederick March caught all the humor, the kind of shantybog Irish humor. He really caught it. His wife was in it, and she wasn't very good. And I think Frederick March would have done the movie, but he insisted they cast his wife.
Was this Florence
Eldridge.
Florence Eldridge.
She wasn't that good.
And who was playing Jean?
I can't remember. Albert, something Morgenstern.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen a good Jean.
This was on Broadway.
Oh, yeah. And then Iceman Cometh was still running off Broadway.
Circle in the Square.
Yeah, yeah.
The grocery store.
Yes.
What is now
Yeah.
a grocery store.
And I remember
Tell us
after
about that.
10 hours of O'Neill, I'm standing with my buddy on the corner after the Tuesday night, and I said, do you want to have a drink? He said, have a drink? We just sat through 2 nights, 10 hours of alcoholism, and you want to have a drink? What's the matter with you? He looking at me on Bleecker and McDougal Street down there. But that was incredible to see the Iceman Cometh. Because that's what got Jose Quintaro the job directing Long Day's Journey. Mm-hmm. Then Charlotta saw the Iceman.
And that ran for a while.
Yeah,
Circle in the Square.
And Jason was the original. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody will ever equal his Hickey. Mm-hmm. It was just a shame when they first did it on television that they went to, I can't think of his name right now, but he wasn't even close to what Jason mm-hmm. did.
And did you just, when you got to New York in that September, did you just hit the streets auditioning? Or?
No, I didn't. I was really very fortunate. When I was doing summer stock in Bemidji, at the end of the season, I got a telephone call from a Dr. Reed. Come and see me, please. And I went to the producer and I said, why did I get this call from this doctor? He said, I don't know. And I go to see him, and I go into his office, and he asked me to sit down and introduced himself. And he said, I've seen all your work this summer, and I've taken the liberty of writing to my sister Patty about you. And I said, oh, thank you. And he paused, and he said, you may know her as Kim Stanley. I fell off the chair because I had come to New York in the 50s and seen her in Touch of the Poet, and then I saw The Goddess, and she was the finest actress I'd ever watched, and I couldn't believe it. So when I got to New York, I got in touch with her, and she and her husband invited me to come up to Suffern and visit them, and then she recommended some people to study with. And I still remember her saying, I don't think you should study with Lee. Mm-hmm. But she suggested Uta Hagen and somebody else. And then from there, I was accepted into Uta's class.
And Kim Stanley, I think, was living above the Cherry Lane. I may be wrong there, but maybe not. Yeah.
She was in Suffern now. They had kind of a farm. She and Arthur Ryder, Albert Ryder. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alfred Ryder.
And
I also had an introduction to
were those two shows that you just talked about, were they off Broadway or were they on Broadway? When you visited New York?
Oh, they were on Broadway. One of the times I came out here in December, that's when I got to see A Touch of the Poet.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came out here in '58, they had just come back from vacation with Long Day's Journey. But Iceman was still running off Broadway.
Right. And so then you went to start studying.
I started with Uda.
Were these your first acting classes?
No, I'd taken acting classes in college.
In college.
But as far as acting classes.
What was the approach to acting classes in college?
Very technical.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very technical. I mean, it wasn't Strasberg or Meisner or any method like that. It was kind of acting by the numbers. They weren't very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
I got more out of dramatic reading classes or things like that for vocal production and things.
And I should think there was some voice and speech in there at the radio school, wasn't there? Or
yeah.
standard American English? Or,
Yeah. Yeah, I've still got traces of my Midwest accent, so I'll never lose that. The O's and the A's. People used to say when I was an actor, you sound like somebody, and then you say, you sound like Henry Fonda. And finally I said, yes, I know I sound like Henry Fonda.
You started studying with Uda.
Started studying with Uda. It didn't work. I don't think I should have been with her. And I think she was a wonderful actress, but reflecting on her classes, I really opposed to some of the thing in class, and it was very obvious who her favorites were, and I don't think you can do that in a class.
Was this scene study or acting technique?
Scene study. Yeah.
So you went right into scene study
Yeah.
at that point.
And I don't think, I mean, I had no, in college, technical training, like sensory work or any of that kind of work, that kind of technique, not even improv, really. So I had no technique whatsoever. Even though I had done all those shows by that time, it was pure instinct with no technique.
Was that hard, making a jump to some
No, I
technical
wanted to
approach,
make
or-
the jump, and then when I left Uda, I went to Michael Howard, and I was with Michael for 4 years.
I mean, tell us about that.
Well, he really opened up acting for me, and you know, Michael is Strasberg Meisner mix, and that's practically what I teach, because I don't believe it's just, you know, Strasberg or you die at sunrise, or Meisner or you die at sun. He just helped to mix those two, and especially big on relaxation and dealing with tension and preparation with that relaxation, kind of relaxation into your concentration, into your imagination. I still teach, I believe, in those 3 steps, and you can't have one without the other. And I would work, you know, while I was with Michael. I think when I first started with Michael, he did a wonderful thing. He took me out, I don't know, for a coffee or a beer or whatever, and he said, I really would like you to give me 1 year. I know you're very anxious to work. And he said, I love that, but I'm going to ask you to give me 1 year. And I said, okay. And I did. And after that year, I got hired by an equity company in Long Island, and I got my equity card, and I kept coming back to Michael.
When he said, give me 1 year, were you taking more than one classes during that year? You were just studying with him 2 or 3 times a week?
But he said, I just want to get you into the work and the technique, because he said, you've got wonderful energy and all of that. But he said, I want to help you with how to work. And I'm so glad I did that.
And the company out on Long Island was?
It was in Mattatuck, Long Island, North Fork Playhouse. They only lasted a year or 2. Jimmy went broke. But again, myself and another guy were signed on as stage manager and as cast. So if I was doing the lead, he stage managed or did a small part, or vice versa.
And the plays you did that summer?
We did Streetcar. I think I did the upstairs. The other guy did Stanley. I did Steve. Everybody Loves Opal. I don't know why that came to mind. It was like a 4 or 5 play season. Did not draw.
Did you,
But-
when you were studying during the year with Michael Howard,
Yeah.
you were going to see plays during that time
Oh, yes.
as well? And
Yeah.
do you remember any off-Broadway in particular plays that you were...
I'm trying to think at that time, because I did go to a lot of theater, and I did go to a lot of off-Broadway. Many times at that period in my life, I had the second act plays. I didn't have the money.
So were you working another job?
Yeah, I worked like at Time Magazine for a couple of years. I worked as a tour guide for Gray Line Sightseeing for about 3-4 years. That was a perfect job, because I did do a lot of office temp jobs, and I hated it. You know, because I had been in the Navy, and I was a good typist. And, and that's a story in itself, if you wanted. But when I got out of boot camp, the person interviewing me said, "Well, sailor, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Oh, I think I want to be a corpsman." And he said, "Sailor, do you know what the battle cry of the Marine Corps is?" And I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Corpsman, corpsman, corpsman." Now, I want you to go back to the barracks, and I want you to think about that, and come back tomorrow morning. And I came back the next morning and said, "You still want to be a corpsman?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do what you do." And he said, "Sailor, that's a terrific decision." I'll never forget that. I don't know what made me want to be a corpsman, because I mean, oh my God, you're right there in the thick of the battle with the bullets flying around you, right? So anyhow, that was my Navy experience.
And you, after the summer in Long Island, then
Yes.
what? You came back to New York?
Came back to New York, and I did some other years of summer stock. I did a season for Bill Hunt. I'm trying to remember that. I was in Oh Dad, Poor Dad with Christine Jorgensen,
Now, oh, wow.
which was, she's an incredible person. We grew to be great friends, and I did that and 1,000 Clowns. With,
When you say a season for Bill Hunt,
yeah, what was the name of his theater? Again, he only lasted a couple of years with the theater. It was in Long Island, Syosset, it was around in that area. And there was just 3 plays. They ran longer, like we opened with 1,000 Clowns, and Milt Kamen was in that. And that was a terrific experience, because I commuted with Milt, and I would be the driver. And he and another guy, Mark London, I learned so much from them as stand-up comics. And Milt's timing. And we would have so many discussions, and he'd say, "I don't want to laugh here, I don't want to laugh here, I want to hear." That's where I want to laugh. Boom. And I was the understudy, and then Herb Sheldon, who's had a pretty big radio personality, was playing Milt's older brother in 1,000 Clowns, and Herb had a heart attack. So I got a call on Friday night, "You're on tomorrow." And I knew the lines, so I got out there for a rehearsal, and I went on, and then Milt had the choice of, you know, them replacing, because Herb wasn't coming back, and Milt said, "No, I want him to do it." So I grew a mustache and, and then tried to look a little bit older, playing Milt's older brother, but I learned so much from Milt Kamen. You remember him? Yeah, he was on Johnny Carson's a lot. And,
what was spell the last name? C-A?
Kamen.
K-A-M-E-N.
Yeah, Milt Kamen, yeah.
And then were you studying during this time as well?
I would go back to Michael.
To Michael.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then let's see, I did 3 years of summer stock in Southbury, Connecticut as an actor. And I was the leading man there for 3 years.
What was that?
Well, again, commercial plays. James Bernard ran the place in Southbury, and I worked there 3 years. The first year I did, I think, 9 out of 10 shows. The second year I did 3, and then the following year 3. But I'd go back to Southbury. And I think, it was in 62 or something like that, I got to do a walk-on on Broadway in Andorra. I did a small part. Michael Langham was the director, Horst Buchholz, Hugh Griffith were the leads. I read daily. It only lasted about 2-3 weeks. It was right during the newspaper strike.
And tell us about Andorra.
Well, it was an interesting experience, and I felt badly for Michael Langham, because he was from Canada, and the Shakespeare Festival in Canada, and he was suddenly working with, you know, method actors, semi-method actors. There was such a mix of acting backgrounds with the people. And Michael, very bright, there was really difficult with communication. And like Horace Buchholz missed a lot of rehearsals. It just wasn't a homogeneous group at all. Because there were so many different acting styles that I don't think Michael really knew how to deal with that.
And Andorra was written by?
Max Frisch.
Oh.
It was an interesting play, you know, set in Andorra with so-called blacks from across the border, and substitute just the Nazis for that. And,
interesting choice for Broadway.
yeah.
So you got to walk on in that.
Yeah, yeah. And I was able, you know, I made sure I was at every rehearsal because I just wanted to watch. And,
Did they have you understudying as well?
no, I didn't understudy.
And then what?
Let's see, I was in a play, that was before that, off-Broadway, for Stella Holt, down at the Greenwich Muse. Remember Stella?
I
She's a
don't, but
wonderful
tell us
lady.
about the...
She was blind, and she never forgot your voice. Years later, if she was there or I dropped in, she knew who I was right away, and I just did a small part in a production of a play called Donegal Tonka by Jules Romain, and Adrian Hall was the director.
And the Greenwich Muse was?
Down on 13th Street.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I did some television. I did, I can't remember one of the religious plays. I was a soldier who found God down in the foxhole, you know, one of those. And I did a few other things on television. I did just a small part in Husbands with John Cassavetes and Ben Gazzara. I was their taxi cab driver in the city, so you see the back of my head. But I got about 2 weeks of work out of it, which was great.
And these TV shows were...
This was a movie.
That was the movie,
Yeah.
but the television shows that you did were nighttime New York network?
Or Sunday afternoon or that kind of
afternoon.
thing, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I never, it was about 1969, or 68 in there, right in that period that my wife at the time, because I said, oh God, I don't want to go back to working in an office, and I've done the Gray Line thing, which is the best non-theater job I ever had. And she said, why don't you try teaching? So she made this suggestion. I said, well, that's a good idea. So I started at the YMCA.
YMCA where?
8th Avenue and 50th, 7th, 58th.
Yeah.
Bert Brinkerhoff was just leaving there, because he had headed the acting class, and I kind of took over Bert's spot. So I started with 12 people. And then it grew from there to my moving to 70th Street the next year, or 71st Street, and sharing a space with Milton Katselas.
71st Street.
Between 2nd and 3rd.
Okay.
I remember Drake's Drum was our hangout.
Was it named after you from the beginning? Or?
Well, it was always the T. Schreiber studio, and the story behind that is I went to backstage to Charlotte Harmon to take an ad, and it was going to be the Terry Schreiber studio, and she said, this is what it would cost. And I said, I don't have that much money. And she said, well, why don't you just make a T. Schreiber studio then, and we can do it for what you have. And I said, great, Charlotte, let's do it. So, I mean, no one's ever called me T in my life, but that's how it got named.
And tell us, starting up, how did you get the first 12 students?
I taught at the Y, and they came with me. And then I was also teaching at a place called the New York Theater. I don't know, something like that. Philip Nolan ran it. And that got into some trouble because I taught there, and then some of the students wanted to study with me privately. So that, I didn't deliberately court the students, but I didn't turn them down either. So I built the class out of that.
The class at the Y was under the auspices of the Y.
Yes.
And it was their their class. They were just hiring you as the teacher.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it built out of that, and even the first season we did plays. We took 2 plays to Kearney, New Jersey, to a little place called the Halfpenny Playhouse. And I think one of them was 6 Characters in Search of the Author. And I can't remember what the other one was. I know the first play I did at Milton's place on 71st Street, and this was, after we moved, was The Crucible.
And 71st between 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah.
And what was that?
Well, it was very interesting. It was a little carriage house right in the middle of a block. And I think it's gone now. There was a
On
film...
the north side or the south side?
North side. There was a film studio right next door to it. Because I remember shooting, a B-movie there as an actor.
Huh.
And you came through a tunnel and into this little theater. And we were doing The Time of Your Life. Hal was a designer that we worked with over 15 years together. He's passed away. But he designed a whole set that when you walked through the door, you walked into a honky-tonk. And there was sawdust on the floor and everything like that. And I would kind of stand outside, the one day we were sold out. I had to stand outside and I was watching it through the window. And there was the bar and everything like that. And all of a sudden, this audience member was standing at the bar. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to stop the play. And he had a beer, ordered a beer, and the problem was he was standing right where the 2 hookers stand that come in. So they just stood on each side of him, and this guy's standing there with his beer mug, looking down all this cleavage, right? Looking around, and he opens his mouth and starts talking. I got to stop the show, because none of the audience, he just fit right in. And of course, after the show, the actors came running over to me and said, "Who was that joker you sent in here?" Because they thought I was trying to keep them spontaneous by sending. I said, "I don't know." And the bartender, Fred Morcell, said, he ordered a second beer. And he took out a wad of bills that would have choked the horse and gave me a 5 and told me to keep the change because beer was like, all beer was a nickel or something like that. I was back in that period. And he said, so put that into today's steak. And because Fred leaned down to him, he said, I leaned down to him at one point and said, you're in a play, do you know that? And the guy was just oblivious. Then he leaves. All of a sudden, he finished his second beer, and he comes walking out. I'm standing outside, and he said, are you the owner here? And I said, yeah. And he said, I really like the place, but you got to know you really water down your drinks. And he left. He goes out the tunnel. It was unbelievable. I don't know who he was, what he wandered in from.
Did you get him to come back a second night?
No, he said, I'll be back tonight. I really like the place. I don't think he ever knew he was in a play. And there was a whole audience sitting around him out there. I'll never forget that.
Wasn't he confused when the 2 hookers started talking?
He didn't seem to be. He's just been enjoying all the cleavage that he was looking at.
Well, so what was the first show with this? You started at acting classes in the T. Schreiber studio, but you started the theater concurrently along with it.
Yes,
It's all one and the same, right?
Yeah.
So what were the first shows? Was it with the...
The Crucible, the 2 we took out to New Jersey. I had done a couple of things at the Y. I had done the Edward Albee play, and I had done The Jewish Wife. The American Dream. I did Albee's The American Dream and The Jewish Wife at Clark Center. I'm trying to think what the other play was we took to New Jersey. And I, for the life of me, can't remember.
And this would have been 1969-70.
So yeah.
There were several theaters in that area at that time, because that would have, I don't know if Manhattan Theater Club was up and running yet, but that would have been 73rd.
In Kearney, New Jersey, yeah.
And then the Phoenix was up there, and a lot of things going on in that area.
Yeah.
And then, what other shows did you start doing at the studio after that?
Well, we always picked, I think we did a 3-play season. Boy, I'm trying to think back to that. I remember the Crucible very vividly. What?
Suddenly last summer, Summer and Smoke.
Yeah. That's the other one we took to New Jersey, was Summer and Smoke. I
Summer
should
and
remember
Smoke.
because I ended up acting in it. Yeah. I did it here a couple of years ago. That's right. Summer and Smoke and Six Carriages were the two plays we took out to New Jersey.
And when you began to teach acting, was it scene study to begin with, or were you doing acting technique?
Well, scene study with acting technique. I've always taught a combination of exercise work and scene
Together.
study.
Uh-huh.
I still do, yeah. Because I think the exercises are adding on to technique, and some of those exercises are so usable.
And you say you were teaching with Milton.
I was sharing a space with Milton Kinselis
This was
and Michael
before he
Schertler.
went, obviously, to
This
the West Coast.
before I went on my own, yeah.
Yeah. but
Because I went from, I also had a summer theater up in Vermont for 2 years that I ran.
Oh, tell us about that.
Bradford Repertory Theater, and I remember our first production. I picked a murder mystery, a musical, and I think, I Can't Hear You When the Water's Running. I think that was our first 3 plays. I remember we opened with Night Must Fall, and then we did the Music Man. And then the next year we came back, we did Oliver, and I'm trying to remember, I did a serious play, but it just, that kind of play just did not draw at all. And after two seasons there, I realized that I was not going to be able to do the kind of plays that I like to do, and I was going to really end up.
What was your venue there?
It was a converted church that had been converted into a theater.
Mm-hmm.
Bradford, Vermont, and some nice support from local people, and of course with Oliver and plays like that, the young people got really a chance
Right.
to be in those plays.
And were
Music
these
Man.
equity companies? Or these
No,
were
not
these were
equity.
non-equity.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to the studio, and you kept teaching and directing at the studio.
Yeah.
And what were the other shows you were then moved into?
Oh boy.
I'll throw a few
I
names. out.
remember doing Elfie,
Uh-huh.
the play version of Elfie.
Joe Egg, Hamlet, of Mice and Men.
Hamlet, and Of Mice and Men were all on Third Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Those were plays we did on Third Avenue.
Third Avenue and what?
26th Street. It was above a paint store. Really a nice location. And that was the place that sprung the theater, sprung us, because we did The Trip Back Down by John Bishop, and Walter Kerr came.
And how did you meet John Bishop?
Let's see, I met John at the Y. We worked out together in the weight room. We became friends.
This is going back to the Y on 8th Avenue? Or
This is going back...
Upper West Side?
It was
Y?
Upper West Side.
Which is 63rd
6th,
Street?
yeah.
Okay.
We met there, and we started talking shop, and he was from the Midwest as well, and we just became very good friends.
Uh-huh.
And then I think he did a season, John directed the Dallas Music Fairs, and then Burry Fredericks has started a theater up in Danbury, Connecticut, a musical theater, and John was up there and hired me to be in Bells Are Ringing, to do the Marlon Brando role, the kid that thinks he's Marlon Brando. John's partner was a wonderful choreographer, Shelley Graham, and so I did that. And then Burry, the theater went broke halfway through the summer, and we never really got to Camelot. But John and I remained good friends, and then John started writing, and I did 2 of his one-acts on when we were down on Third Avenue.
And what were those one acts?
They were, one of them was one that a father and son, and the one son has been killed in a truck accident, and they have to go and pick up the body. And the father doesn't know if maybe his son committed suicide or whether it was really an accident. And the son that's with him is like very cut off, very locked up. And the father is trying to get him to talk about what he felt about his brother. Ed Seaman did the lead, did the father. It was just marvelous. James Ray Weeks did the son. And it's just, they're staying at a motel. And it's just the father getting the son to open up about his brother. And that was coupled with a play that John wrote that kind of gets into a whole sexual kind of orgy evening.
And Ed Seaman went on to write too.
To act in a lot, yeah.
To act in a
Yeah,
lot.
Ed was in Trip Back Down for me at the studio and on Broadway, and he was also in Devour the Snow.
Right.
Good actor.
Very good.
Good actor. I loved working with Ed. And Jimmy Ray Weeks did one. It was very funny when we were casting, what is the name of that play? The Father-Son play. We were having a hard time finding somebody. We needed somebody in their mid-30s, kind of a guy that would play middle linebacker on a football team, right? And we couldn't find it. And I'm doing a workout at the YMCA, and George from the academy, we're both in headstands together, right? And we're talking shop. And I said, George, I'm looking for this actor. And I described him, and George said, I have the perfect guy for you. And we got down out of our headstands, and he says, his name is Jimmy Ray Weeks, and when we finish, I'll give you his telephone number. So I called Jimmy and set up an appointment. I called John, and I said, come down to my studio, John, because we may have found the guy. So at my studio on 3rd Avenue, you came up the stairs and came down this long hallway, right? And John and I are sitting there in the theater. And this guy comes kind of loping down the hallway with a duffel bag, right? And John and I looked at each other, and John looked at me and said, if he doesn't lisp, he's got the role. I will never forget John saying that. Jimmy read 2 lines, and we said, can you do this, right? And he and Ed were marvelous together.
And the Trip Back Down, then, when you did a production at your studio.
It started on 3rd Avenue.
Yeah.
Gene Rupert did the lead, and opening night, Walter Kerr came and gave us a wonderful write-up in the Times, and that the phone started ringing off the hook. Because I was my own box office at the time, right? And one day the phone rang, and he said, Mr. Schreiber, I would like 2 tickets for the Trip Back Down. And I said, what is your name, please? He said, this is Otto Preminger. I looked at my phone, and I thought, Otto Preminger. I couldn't believe it. It just, and some of the people that came, suddenly when my little house manager said, Dustin Hoffman is standing here. I said, well, let him in. You read it, let him in. But we had people like that coming out of the woodwork to see that play. I think Dustin was considering it for a while.
And then the show moved from there to
Broadway. Philip Rose produced it.
On Broadway.
Yeah.
And what theater did you go to on Broadway?
I know I did one show at the Golden. I'm not sure it was the Golden or what. I can't remember what theater it was.
And did you have a good run on Broadway with the show? No. So, okay, and then what other shows then after that?
Well, it's hard because we've done so many. I'm trying to think when we moved.
So the studio moved from
71st Street, then we moved down to 3rd Avenue. And then on the 3rd Avenue, we were doing Lemon Sky. I hadn't directed it. And
Lemon Sky was a revival of Lanford's play.
And it was a Monday night, I'll never forget it, and my phone rang at about 12:30. I had come back from class, and I just got into bed and said, Terry, your whole studio's up in flames. I said, is this a joke? He said, no, there's fire trucks all over the place. So I got out of bed and got down there, and we had there was a bar next door to my studio that was serving underage guys, and something happened that they decided to get even with a bar, and they stuffed something in my mailbox by mistake and lit the place up on fire. So
Wow.
that was really hard. So we had to, people in the off Broadway, this was a wonderful story. I cannot tell you the people that rallied and phone calls. If you need a space, what do you need? And that offered space. We ended up down on East 4th Street, completing, because we were only halfway through the season.
And the East 4th space was the Wonder
Horse was
became Wonder Horse?
It was when we took it.
It was Wonder Horse.
Yeah.
What it had just this and what around about what year was this?
This was probably in the 70s.
Uh-huh. And what was the story of Wonder Horse before you got there?
It was Edward Albee's Playwright Slam.
After they moved from Van Dam? Or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and then it became, two women took it over, and it became the Wonder Horse.
And the Wonder Horse was a 99-seat theater.
Yeah.
Upstairs.
Yeah.
Next to the truck.
No, you came in, there was a place upstairs, there was another
Yeah, I remember
rehearsal
that.
hall upstairs, but
Uh-huh.
you kind of came up these steps and then right into the theater.
It was right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was next to On 4th, across from La Mama.
Yeah, and I used to work there. A friend of mine ran it when it was the East End Theater. And I did some backstage work for him.
Do you remember what show that was?
I remember the two shows, we did Squat Betty and the Sponge Room, two English plays. That was when I first met Milt Kamen, I think. And Bob went broke in there as the East End Theater. And then I think when he got out of there, it became the Wonder Horse.
And it was next to the Truck and Warehouse.
That's right.
Theater.
Yeah.
Was the Truck and Warehouse functioning as a theater
Yes,
when
as
you
a
were
matter
down
of fact,
there?
I saw the John Guare play,
House of Blue Leaves.
House of Blue Leaves. I saw that there at the Truck and Warehouse.
Must have been there right about when you arrived, or
Around that time, because I
Yeah.
remember seeing it there.
that would have been 70,
Yeah.
72, 73.
Yeah. And it was very interesting because every area we have gone into has been really kind of a quiet, dead area. And all of a sudden, we're there and another theater opens up and suddenly there's restaurants. That's exactly what happened on East 4th Street.
Yeah.
Suddenly, restaurants started opening up and that whole Lower East Side started taking off. And it's the same thing when we moved here. This was a very gray area. And all of a sudden, two hotels go in and
How long were you down in the Wonder Horse?
we moved to the one, I think about 8 years or so. Yeah, and then we moved up here from the Wonder Horse. So
What
that
year
would
did
have
you
put
move
us
up here?
I think 2006. I think we've been here about 10 or 12 years.
Let's go back a bit to when did you first start working with Circle Rep?
I started working with Circle Rep, I think, in the early 70s. That was when I got in touch with Marshall, because we were all on the UBA committee together. And I'll never forget that committee,
Tell us
especially when I
about
had
that.
the fire. Because it was Marshall Mason, Chris Martin, Eve Admonson, Bob Moss, who really was instrumental in getting 42nd Street going. And that was when Manhattan Theater Club had just joined, and Playwrights Horizons had just joined, and but all of those people, it was such a great movement because everybody helped everybody.
And the UBA committee was the Off-Broadway
Alliance.
Alliance.
Yeah, and a woman named Virginia Kahn, Jenny Kahn, ran it. And it was just a great group. And when I had the fire, all of them called. And we'd be doing a show when I did Hamlet. Even Joe Papp helped with props. Joe Papp was very generous. Because the access to lances and things like that I didn't have, they all came from the public theater.
Huh.
And those other people that I mentioned, Chris Martin was so helpful, and Marshall Mason. And I think after there was a hiatus there doing productions, and that's when I worked for Circle Rep. And I was also doing plays. I worked at the Pittsburgh Public Theater. I worked at Syracuse Stage. I did
Pittsburgh Public Theater was Medal of Honor rag.
Yeah.
Tom Cole?
Yeah, Tom Cole.
Was that right? Tom
Yeah.
Cole?
Yeah. And I did Ashes there. I did Vanities.
These were regional productions of
Yeah,
those shows.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Ben Shackman. I loved working for Ben. He was kind of a miniature Joe Papp. He was a feisty guy, but very supportive. And he was the kind of guy you could have a fight with, and it didn't carry over,
Yeah.
right? But he really put the theater there. Yeah,
Very much, almost
Yeah.
single-handedly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we were putting Ashes together with Vanities. And he would call me, and he would always say, Schreiber, Shackman here. Now, be honest with me. Would you come here and just do Vanities and not do Ashes? It was a rotating rep. And I said, no, Ben, I really want to do Ashes. And he said, now, next question. Would you come here and slough off Vanities just to get at Ashes? And I said, no, Ben, you know me. If I'm going to do the show, I'm going to do the show. And all of a sudden he said, all right, Schreiber, just fuck you. Go fuck yourself. Just go fuck you. You're going to close my fucking theater with that fucking play Ashes. And you're going to be accountable. Just fuck you. The contract's in the mail. I'll see you in a week. I quote that conversation verbatim. I'll never forget that conversation with him. But yet he was so supportive, but he was so worried about Ashes. And I said, Ben, have a paramedic in the audience. Because I can tell you, you're in the round, somebody will faint. I saw it at the Public. And he said, no, no, no. The first preview, boom, a guy fell out on stage. And I said, Ben, I told you to have a paramedic here. I knew that was going to happen because she comes in and she's bleeding. And guys have a tendency to hold their breath. And that's what the guy was. And he fell out on stage.
You mean audience members?
Yeah.
Have a tendency?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I saw it. The day I saw it at the Public, 2 people fainted.
Huh. And let's go back to Circle Rap for 1 second.
Yeah.
So you did at Circle Rap, the first show was?
The first show I did for them was Feedlot.
Uh-huh. And Feedlot was written by?
Patrick Myers.
Yep. And he had sent you a script?
He had sent it to Circle Rep.
He sent it to
Because it had been
I
done
see.
in L.A.
So it was an interesting, you saw it as being as an interesting play, and
Yeah.
then you wanted to get
Yeah,
know more.
and he and I really became very, very good friends.
Mhm.
Then the following year, I did His Glorious Morning. But Feedlot was really successful.
And who were the actors in Feedlot?
Jeff Daniels,
Uh-huh.
Ed Seaman was in it. I'm trying to remember the young man. It was his first play. Jimmy Ray Weeks was in it. Glorious Morning was Tanya Berezin. And whose other name is up there? Tanya Berezin
Nancy Snyder.
and Jonathan Hogan.
Yeah.
And then the guy, the older man, had a big Doug Watson.
Doug Watson,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
I worked with on Another World.
Yeah, yeah,
Lovely actor.
yeah,
So you did 2 of his shows there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Any Bishop shows there? John Bishop
No,
shows?
John directed his own place there.
Oh.
Yeah.
But he was the literary manager for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Were these both of these shows, were they in the space that we all associate with
Sheridan
Circle Rap,
Square.
which is now it was Sheridan Square?
Yeah.
This was after they had moved down from
Yeah, I
the
love that space.
Upper West Side. So did I.
I can't go in there. It's a bar now. I can't go in there. There's just too
And
many
Marshall
memories.
put a picture of himself and his husband on Facebook yesterday, where
Of whom?
Marshall Mason put a
But-
picture of he and his husband
Danny?
on,
Yep.
yes, on Facebook
Yeah.
yesterday, of going in there for a meal and
Yeah.
celebrating his birthday.
Yeah,
I thought
they drop in here every
I
once
don't
in a
even
while.
go in there anymore since it was a theater. I miss it. So there was some beautiful shows there.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful work.
Well, Marshall did good work. It was really a lovely place to work. Very supportive.
And a great place to see a play.
Yeah. Remember seeing View from the Bridge there with Bobby Duvall.
Wow.
Oh God.
As part of Circle Rap? Was
That,
it Circle
I
Rep
think
show?
before Circle Rep went in there, I think
Before
I saw
them,
it there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll never forget Bobby Duvall. God, he was good, Eddie.
Was it set up the same way where you had to walk across the stage to get to the chairs and
I don't remember walking across the stage to get to the stairs,
yeah,
but I think it was in that space.
yeah, because the chairs faced
Yeah.
7th Avenue, so you had to walk in
Yeah.
across whatever the set was, and
Yeah.
then you were against the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about where we go from here.
Where do we go? John Ford Noonan?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that was an experience. That was down on East 4th Street. And it was really an offbeat play for me to do. But I got to know John quite well. And Pamela Reed, was that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was wonderful in it. And that was a play, by that time we had the fire. And I did that play in a club. Was it the East Village? Trying to remember where we were with that play. And it was just absolutely the perfect setting for that play. I'm trying to think the name of that place.
Well,
Yeah, I can't think of the.
it'll come to you. The Devourer of the Snow.
Yeah. I did that at Hudson Guild. And
Hudson Guild is down in
Right
this
here.
neighborhood, right down the
Yeah,
street.
yeah.
Yeah.
Craig Anderson
Uh-huh.
was the producer. And again, I had Ed Seaman and Jimmy Ray Weeks. And the play got picked up by Manny Eisenberg. And it was it should never, ever have gone to Broadway. It was a Broadway play, you know. I mean, it was about cannibalism, and it was about the Donner Pass people and how they survived. But I think we would have gotten a run out of it at an off-Broadway theater. It's just not a Broadway audience play at all.
But you did get a bit of a run at the Hudson Guild.
Yes, we got the full run at the Hudson Guild, but I think we lasted 3 nights on Broadway.
And a lot of good plays were coming out of Hudson Guild around that time because it was
Yeah.
Da and
Yeah. Craig was hot.
that and
Yeah.
Breakfast with Les and Bess a few years later. And
I don't know where Craig has disappeared. I think he went back to California and got involved in film. Really, really liked him.
huh. Right. Going back just a little bit, you did The Wonder Horse All the Way Home.
Yes, I didn't direct it.
Tad Moselle's play.
Yes, yeah. It was a very, very good production of it.
And Curtains? And does anybody here do the Peabody?
Yeah, that, I didn't do Curtains. Lee Wallace, an actor friend of mine, directed Curtains. Or he was in it. He and Marilyn Chris, his wife, were in it. Can't remember who directed it. Peabody was by Enid Rudd, and I think I got attracted to it because as a kid I remember all those Dan Daly musical movies, and it had elements of that. We opened, as a matter of fact, The Wonder Horse with that, and it bombed. I mean, it just didn't work. I want to work with rewrites, and instead of getting a rewrite, I get more of what I wanted cut. I was just a writer that just, she's passed away, and I really became good friends with her and her husband, but with the rewrites, it was really very, very difficult. Betsy von Furstenberg did the lead, and Ted Furlow.
And you directed the Desire Under the Elms.
Yes,
For the Roundabout.
for the Roundabout.
And what space was that?
Where did we do that?
The movie theater on 23rd or the
Yes, yeah,
Kathy Baker?
yeah, yeah, not a good experience.
Oh. How about and then K2?
K2, okay, that, Arthur Storch, I did a lot of work up in Syracuse, and Arthur called me with the script. They had done it at Arena Stage, and then Arthur wanted to do it. or it was the same time there was an overlap that Pat had given rights to 2 different places. So, but I did it at Syracuse Stage, and I don't know. It's a woman producer, and I don't know if she came up there to see it or what, but anyhow, she picked up, I think she saw it at Washington Arena Stage. Mary, I'm trying to think of her last name. Anyhow, it was Patrick that got it for me. She wanted to use the Washington Stage production. And Patrick said, no, I want Terry Schreiber to direct it. He really understands my work. So it was Patrick that got me the job on Broadway.
And was that when Ming first
Ming
started
designed
doing?
it, yeah.
Had he done it at Arena Stage, or he done?
I think so. Yes,
He'd
had done it
a
at
previous
Arena Stage,
production
yeah.
of it, and the cast of that was Jeff DeMond and Jay
Patterson.
Patterson,
Yeah.
and Jeff DeMond.
Yes. And it was a script that Al Pacino was considering, and surprisingly, he wanted to play. Well, he wanted to play Taylor, and in our conversations, I said, I think it'd be much more interesting with you in the other role, with the guy that's broken his leg. And he said, well, what I want to do is this. He said, let's do 2 weeks of work on it, and I'll do Taylor one time, and then we'll do 2 more weeks in another month, and you know. And I talked to the writer about it, and Patrick said, no, I don't want to workshop this. We're ready to go. The play is an hour and a half long at the most. Why do I want to workshop? It's tight. So I had to say to Pacino, I'm really sorry, but the Pele just doesn't want to do workshop of it. We'll present it at the Actors Studio for 2 weeks and do all that work on it. And I was even saying to him, but the script is there. I mean, I don't know what's to workshop in this script.
So when you did it on Broadway, you just went into rehearsals for Broadway.
Yes, and they had to get us the theater to rehearse it because we need a semblance of the mountain. You can't rehearse that in a regular rehearsal hall because you need at least platforms built up.
And did you get the theater for
Yeah.
the rehearsal period?
Yeah. I don't know if we had it for the full rehearsal, but we had it early enough.
You got it early.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Wow. And why don't we take a little break here? The John Bishop play was
The trip back down, Cabin 12.
Cabin 12.
Right, that was the one with the father and the son.
in the hotel room or the motel.
It's such a moving play. It's really a terrific little tight one-act play.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, tell us about your work and the books you've written and your work as an acting teacher since you moved up here.
Okay, well, as I said, my classes are a combination of exercise work and scene study. And I'm probably a cross between Strasberg and Meisner work. The acting classes are really about, I don't teach the beginning classes. So I teach more intermediate to advanced. But consequently, the people in my classes have had prior experience, prior training. And the ages can vary. I mean, I've had people in class that are in their 60s and 70s. That's usually my Friday class at that point because they've done other training. But I have a series of exercises that I do, beginning with what I borrowed from Sandy Meisner, the Spoon River exercise. And each exercise gets a little bit more demanding and a little bit more taking risks and taking chances. And encouraging and providing a safe atmosphere that people feel they can open up and let themselves happen without any judgment about it. I'm not into doing, therapy with the work, but it's just getting the actor to trust themselves because you are your own instrument. And there's no other instrument to play on besides yourself. And finding what you're doing, I think you've got to make a connection to what you're doing. I think then you can as if. But I just don't understand David Mamet's theory about as-ifing your way through a role. And when I see David Mamet plays, I don't see his actors doing just that, because I think it's kind of intellectualizing it and playing an idea, but never letting yourself connect with it. And I want that connection. I'm against some of the actor studio kind of thing. I don't think you have to go out and live the life of the character while you're doing it. But you've got to find the internal connections that you make to this role. If you're going to touch me sitting out there in the audience and move me and convince me that, you know, I'm watching a real person up here. So it's the exercises that as I move along, some of them are just opening up exercises and letting yourself happen. I may do a repetition exercise with somebody that just, whatever line I'm throwing at you, like, I'm scared. Just open up to it. I'm scared. And let it in. And I'm trying to help the actors too. I think one of the biggest problems is the vocal work and speech. And I know we have a wonderful speech teacher, dialect coach here in Paige Clements, but it's just so that American way of speaking where you trail off with everything. You know, and I think it's also a wonderful way to cover your emotions by holding your voice back on your throat, not sending it forward. So in my classes, I'm trying to make the actors very aware of language. I even like that Spoon River exercise. It's poetry. It's a poem. You've got to use the words.
Give us an encapsulated version of what the exercise with Spoon River is.
You take a poem from Spoon River. You decide from the last two lines what the emotion is. Love, anger, fear, joy, or sadness. Pick one of the 5 emotions. It's there in the last 2 lines. Now we're going to process. This is like a director that gives you a result they want. I want you sad here, or I want you joyous here. Okay, that's the result. I've got to work on what takes me to that. So I have them write a biography on the character. I'm very big on writing biographies. And consequently, you're going to go back to the 1800s. But I like them to start with a reality. Where did your people come from originally? Like yesterday, somebody said, my people are from Germany. And I said, well, how did your grandfather then get from Germany to Ellis Island? And how did he get to Spoon River is set roughly outside of Springfield, Illinois. There is a Spoon River there, there's no town. So that you could use for a reality to start with. This is where my people, your mother, I don't want you to do 15 minutes of your grandfather, but then where did your parents meet? How did they meet? You could use your own family history there, how your mother and dad left. And then we're going to get into you and how far you went in school, what you did for a living, if you married, had children.
Are you interviewing the actor with this?
No, they have to write it.
Then
they sit down, and it's like, you know, you as a director, when an actor comes in and you look at the actor and say, tell me about yourself. That's what we're doing with this. So you're telling your life history. Now, it should lead you to fulfilling that emotion you named. So in other words, if you pick joy, don't end up by saying, and then my brother and I burned to death in the barn. Right? You've got to lead yourself with the bio to that. Now the next thing is parallel dialogue, and I really, really believe in that. So you could rewrite the poem completely in your own words, or you could use plug-in words. Like a woman starts out with, if you picked her, you'd pick anger, and she starts out with, I could have been as great as George Eliot, except for an untoward fate. Well, a woman doing the class said, I could have been as great as Meryl Streep, except for an untoward fate. And the woman in the poem says, well, look at the portrait painted of me. She substituted, look at the photo taken of me. And then the woman says, I met the druggist John Slack. She wanted to be a writer. Well, I'd have you substitute some guy in your life. And he promised me time to write, and the woman proceeds to have 8 children, and she never had time to write. And she was changing the last baby's diaper, she stuck a pin in her hand, and she died of lockjaw. And the last lines are, I tell you, my friends, sex is the curse of life. Okay, so that's why you pick anger. So the woman doing it substituted, my career was just getting going in New York, and my grandfather got ill, and I was called back home as the eldest in the family to take care of him. And I lost 2 years of my career. So that's how she used the parallel dialogue. It's a wonderful tool. I'm surprised to find out that the British use it a lot, especially with their word consciousness. But it's a wonderful way to break down a Shakespeare speech. And put the quality of mercy in your own words. I want the writer's words, ultimately. Ed Seaman works that way a great deal. And at first I had the justice, and he said, no, I work around the words. I'll give you it all, word for word. Let me work around the words. And I trusted him, and that's exactly what he did. So that's that part of the exercise. Writing the bio and writing the parallel dialogue and doing it for us. At first I have you just initially read the poem, complete a line, complete a sentence or a thought, and just look up and see where the words take you. Because you picked this poem, so obviously you identify with something in it. Just see what images come in. But then we do the bio, the parallel dialogue, and then I say, okay, this is your one day to come back to Earth. Put somebody up there that is the person you must say this to right now. And decide whether you want to give them something or get something from them, like an action verb. And I'll just ask him, who are you putting up there? And yesterday the person said, my father. And I said, do you want to get something from him or give? And he said, get. And I said, pick an action verb that really inspires your imagination, or what you want to get from your dad with this. So that's part one of the exercise. Part two gets into a psychological gesture. So I ask them to go to the zoo, and if you came back, would you come back as a bird, an animal, an aquatic creature? What would you come back as? And don't decide ahead of time. Walk around to the zoo and say, that's what I come back as. Then I want you to spend time really observing, let's say it's an animal, where that animal's center is, its psychological center, from where its movements come from. And I want you to give yourself that same center. And do some housework with that center. Go to the store with that center. Come to the studio with that center. Get used to it. And so it gets into a piece of character work then. And I keep using, like Daniel Day-Lewis or Earl Street, they work with that all the time. Yeah, and they're wonderful. And I said, if you get into it, there's actors we see that we see the same mannerisms in everything they're doing. If they just do something like this, we get some different mannerisms, right? It's predictable. At this point, she's going to go to her hair. She does that in everything she does, So I think it's an awfully good exercise. Now, I copied some of it from Sandy, but I think some of it is stuff I've added on. But it's a very good exercise.
And were there other plays that I have missed, or other productions that I've missed that you either acted in or directed that were wildly influential in your career?
I love Chekhov. He's my favorite writer. And I've been able to do all 4 of his plays, some of them twice. So that is always, even in class, working on Chekhov, it's so rich. And I don't care if it's 100 years old, it's as present as it. That's why I hate it when they update a Chekhov production. You don't have to do that. You just don't have to do it. It speaks to us 100 years later, because he was so a physician of our souls, all of us. He's an incredible human being, and what he wrote. So I love working on Chekhov. I've really enjoyed Pinter, the Pinter I've done. We did a double bill of the Homecoming and Birthday Party, and we played them in rotating rep, which was just wonderful to rehearse one day and the other one the next day. And I've done not old times, I did The Trail up in Syracuse. I thought it was a very good production. Ed Janess was the lead, he was very good. And I love Tennessee Williams. So those are the 3 playwrights that I probably treasure the most.
And what are the plays of Tennessee's that you love?
Oh, I've done Summer and Smoke a couple of times. I've done Suddenly Last Summer. I've done Orpheus Descending. I've done Streetcar. I did Streetcar in Japan, which was an interesting experience. And I've acted in Streetcar a couple of times. What other Williams plays? I've always wanted to do The Rose Tattoo. I never have. done Orpheus Descending a couple of times. He's the closest to Chekhov for me. And just his humanity. That's what I love about his work.
And I see other shows here of Japan, the Miracle Worker.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about
I've done
that.
that twice in Japan. She's terrific. Shinobu Otaki is her name. And she's phenomenal. And it's kind of, there's actors in Japan that they have their vehicle. And maybe every other year they revive it. It's their role. It was wonderful to watch them work. To be in rehearsal, they really are so dedicated. And I know Koji Yakusho, who was in Bent, probably one of the best actors I've ever worked with.
Oh.
And he was doing a Japanese soap opera, or a kabuki kind of, or not kabuki, but one of those sword fighting things, at night. I would have rehearsal starting at 11. He would be there every morning at 10 o'clock, stretching on the floor. And he was wonderful in Bent. Marty Sherman came over and said, "Oh my God." Just terrific. I had problems with the guy playing the other role, because they cast the show for him. He was just very, very miscast.
Where was this, in Tokyo?
Tokyo, yeah.
Tokyo,
yeah.
At a theater or an acting school?
Yeah, they're all in lovely theaters, and it's just a wonderful place to work, and the dedication, and because they want to learn more about Western style acting. And it's interesting because I have to know the script very well, because it's in Japanese, so I have a translator. And it's almost like doing a gibberish exercise. If your intention is clear, pretty much know what they're saying, you know. Yeah.
And where do you see, do you go out to see much theater
Yeah.
now?
There's just concluding the Japanese thing. The first time I went over was with K2, and my translator said, "Terry, if you learn one Japanese word, please learn Otsukare-sama deshita, because it means thank you very much for a good day's work." And she said, if you don't say that at the end of rehearsal, the actors will think you don't like them, and they're liable to stay here the rest of the night. So I'll never forget the first time I sit up and bow, "Otsukare-sama deshita," and the whole room yells, "Otsukare-sama!" And then the whole room just explodes with that. It's wonderful. Anyhow, that's an amusing story. You asked Casey what?
Where do you think the whole off-Broadway movement is going?
Well,
Positive about it? Or you...
yeah, when it first happened, I think it was a godsend, because the off-Broadway scene had kind of dried up, you know, in the sense that theaters were too small and you couldn't make it financially with the costs. So, I mean, I thought off-Broadway that really got going in the 70s was the thing that saved the theater. And I still think it is the place where you can take chances and you can take risks, and you can work on material, and you can charge a reasonable price for a ticket. You're not paying $100 and some for a ticket. And I think it's a chance to really grow. And yeah, there's pressure with it to do a good production of it, but it's not the pressure that's, you know, on Broadway, that it's got to be a hit. And I think sometimes productions are rushed into performance too quickly. I think off offers you a chance to do workshop productions. We just finished a workshop production. A year ago, we did a workshop production, and then we went on and did it as a full-scale production. Right now, there's some people interested in this workshop production that we just did. I probably would not move it into the season. But
And when you say move it into the season, you currently do a season of plays here,
yeah.
meaning how many plays?
Well, we used to do 3 or 4. Now, I can't talk about this yet because we're undergoing a big space change. I know we will be doing a one-act series, and I know we will be doing a new work series. That means the one acts do get a performance. We draw very well with those. And then the new works we'll select. There'll probably be a new work going up once every 2 weeks as a reading.
Wow.
Because I think the play we just did, Alpha 66, I think we started with 176 people, 176 scripts. And then we narrowed it down to 4. And we did readings of each one of those. Because I just think it's the wonderful thing about Off, you can nurture the play, you can bring it along and not just throw it out there yet for critics or like that. Because it gets one turn on the merry-go-round and that's it.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes plays are rushed to Broadway too quickly. Or people start rehearsal in a play and said, you know, we're taking this to Broadway. Get rid of that. It just puts all that pressure on. We're doing it here now. We're exploring. And it's a new work, and it's got to be nurtured. We'll find out with an audience what works, what doesn't.
Do you have a writing program that goes along with the?
We did have a playwriting program.
But no longer?
No. It's very difficult to get somebody to teach it. Most well-known writers, I've asked Michael Weller, I've asked John Shanley, I've asked a number, they don't want to teach. I think they feel it gets in the way of their own work. And I found here, Patrick Myers for a year or so taught a playwriting class, way back when we were on East 4th Street. It becomes complicated in our setup because if we're doing no works, they want to see it put up, and we don't have the time to do that out of a playwriting class. And I found a lot of times, a lot of the writer coming out of Patrick's class was the kind of play he'd write.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real danger in that.
Do you teach directing classes?
I did, and we don't have those any longer because they had to put work up. You know, and it just, there's only so much time, and it's not fair to just have them do scenes in class and not mount some of the work. We would have a director's workshop, but we've done away with those 2 classes.
Mm-hmm. Anything else we missed, or anything you can think of that we should talk about?
Well, I think, I mean, you know and I know, the arts are in big trouble financially. You can kiss the National Endowment goodbye. And it's just a shame to have somebody in office like this that is so obtuse about the arts, among other things. But it's just, you know, I'm really afraid for the arts. Because, you know, this off scene, the off-Broadway scene, you've got to have support. And if there's money's not there, because you're not going to make money doing this, you're lucky to break even. And you have to have the people on the board or people, donors or sponsors that believe in what you're doing. Yeah. And now with the grants pulling out, I think it's, you know, there's just not going to be funds for it. And I think that's very, very sad.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that the theater, I remember Harold Clurman saying, I really don't watch the television or read the newspapers that much. I go to the theater, it tells me exactly what's going on in my country. And I think Harold was very right. I mean, when we look at some of the plays, I mean, look at it going to Oslo. I didn't know that much about those 1993 meetings, you know. And I think it is a teaching tool. And I think even, you know, doing comedy, I mean, I think there's such a lesson in that, because I think good comedy is pain exaggerated. You know, I really do. Especially farce.
Yeah.
And I think you could learn a great deal of that and have a very enjoyable evening.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Great.
but that's that would be my final statement on this. I just I fear for where we're going. We're not going to be able to go. And it's just so sad to see, like, the Pearl Theater just went out of business. That was a good theater.
Excellent theater.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a deficit here. And you just can keep going with that only so long.
Right.
And it's changed our seasons and what we can do and what we have to cut back on. And I'm sure there's many other theaters, you know, are year-round places. I don't know where Signature's at or all of those theaters. But the expenses are big. And we've got to keep encouraging playwrights.
Yeah.
And they've got to hear their work done, whether it's readings or whatever, but they've got to hear their work done. Otherwise, they're just writing in a vacuum.
Right.
Yeah.
All right,